Mabuhay, Kamustika, welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. The video for today is called From Famine to Feast. How I barely survived 30 years of singleness. Now, some people think singleness is the greatest thing in the world, and I don't know what that means. I can't relate to that. I was single a long time, and somebody had asked me about that and to do a video, so to explain why I was alone for 30 years, well, that's because I couldn't find somebody to marry, but why was that? And one of the things I think was I didn't really start getting serious about looking for a wife until I was about 24 years old. And it's true, by that time, a lot of people are, out of college and they've pretty much maybe found somebody. This was a long time ago. Maybe things are different now. But back then, I can see where, if you hadn't picked somebody by then, that you're going to be waiting a long time, and that was probably part of it. I didn't think my standards were anything unreasonable, but when I started looking seriously about that time, and I won't go into great detail about my past, but in the past I didn't know the things I knew now. I did not know that marriage was important to God, and that the Bible even talked about it a whole lot. And once I started learning it did, then I wanted to do the right thing and get married. And so you start at church and you find out, well, there's nobody here. I remember one time we had a singles bus trip somewhere, and I signed up for it, and I showed up one Saturday morning and waited for a few hours before I realized there was not going to be a bus trip there. And later I found out it was canceled. Nobody bothered to tell me, and I think I was the second person that signed up. And that's just kind of the way things seemed to go over the decades, was I just couldn't find somebody. I'd have a date lined up and they wouldn't keep it. Basically, it was just hard to find anybody to go out with. Now, I didn't want to just go out with somebody for the sake of going out with somebody. I didn't want to use anybody. And kind of ashamed to say it, but in 30 years, I think I had 6 times I went out with women, and that was spaced out, and it was, humiliating. I just didn't know. The 90s were filled with depression because I started thinking, wow, maybe God doesn't like me. Maybe I did something so terrible that he has forgiven me, but is going to discipline me with lifelong singleness. And his word kept telling me that that's not his will. It says to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, let every woman have her own husband. Proverbs 5 talks plenty about God's desire and place for a man to have sexual intimacy. There's only one place, it's marriage. God was married. He was married to Israel for hundreds and hundreds of years. Unfortunately, he had to divorce her for unfaithfulness, sexual harlotry. And Jesus himself, the Son of God, is going to be married to a bride. The church is going to be his bride. And so the Godhead, there's marriage there. Marriage is God's idea. The need for marriage is created in us by God. And so I didn't want to give up. So what kept me going? Well, it was wrong to kill myself. Suicide, that's wrong. I can see why people do it, because they think that it's hopeless to keep going when you don't want to face the same thing day after day after day, and you just don't know how long you're going to live and how long you're going to have to put up with whatever the pain is that you're dealing with. I knew I couldn't do that, and nobody had taken my life, so there was still a chance I could marry. I did study marriage. I started that way back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s because I assumed I would be married, so I wanted to keep learning. I read every book I could. I listened to every tape I could. I talked to people that would talk to me about it, tried to get to know, people in church, for mentors that would help me to be prepared. And I think they probably wondered if it was all a waste of time if I was ever going to get married, and maybe I was just too picky deep down inside. They would be thinking, I knew I wasn't. I was just trying to be the right person for the right person at the right time. And so I kept studying, and then I had the opportunity to do international dating. I went on the website Christian Filipina, and lo and behold, there was an endless amount of women to communicate with, and I believe they're very serious about getting married there. And all of a sudden, I had choices, and I met my wife online, I think on March 17th, and I hadn't had a thought about being single since then. We got married after 54 days. No, I wasn't desperate and just going to take the first person I saw. We talked for 4 hours a day average, one day 7 hours, one day 10 hours, because it was a job to me to find this wife, and I was so close. And we got married very quickly. I would have done it sooner if I could. It took 54 days, and she's been here over 2.25 years. We were married almost 3 years. And so I survived with the hope that it could still happen. I survived with the knowledge that it was God's will. I also survived with trying to find somebody, each period of years that would be like a good friend or a mentor that would help, keep my chin up. Although sometimes they were single too, and it was hard on them. Although it seems most people, eventually get married. But God replaced one married friend with somebody else, and I just knew it was the right thing to do. And I knew it could happen any day. And I also started increasing the prayer. That helped me survive, even though I didn't see anything happening at the time. And I'll do a video on this about the prayer of the friend at midnight and the unjust judge. Those are two prayers Jesus taught us to pray, and never give up. If we know something is God's will, we pray for it, we don't stop praying for it. In faith, we believe we have that if it is God's will. Marriage most certainly is God's will. Who to marry? Well, we have some choice in that. I also got the church to pray for me. I said in a prayer letter, email actually at church, put on there, Bob needs a wife. That's it. There shouldn't be any explanation needed. Bob needs a wife. And I asked the church to pray for it until it happened, even if it took 5 or 10 years, and I started looking like a laughingstock because Bob didn't have a wife after all this prayer. But I wanted more people to ask God on my behalf for what I needed, absolutely needed, and that was a wife. And I'll bet it wasn't a year before I was married after that. And so once I got married, my wife has been embraced by the church because they know that they prayed her into my life. So I wasn't always looking for a wife during that time, those 30 years, because there really wasn't anybody to pursue. But I survived with faith in God that He wanted me to be married. I studied His Word on how to get married or how to be a good husband. And I continued to pray. I continued to watch and keep my eyes open for opportunities. While the things I was trying weren't working, I just kept going. I didn't go MGTOW and say, that's it, all women are terrible. I just kept going because absolutely I can't live without a wife. I just can't. And the fact that I'm married and how well that's going for me just simply underscores that I need a wife, you probably need a wife, and I encourage you not to give up. Learn how things are going to be in marriage. You do have a role to play. You're the protector of the wife, you're her provider. You need to dwell with her according to knowledge. You have to be considerate. You have to take care of her in many ways, and it's a good thing. Women are responders, and I think your needs will get met, but a lot of the onus is on the man and his ability to provide. But this video was about how I survived, and hopefully you can learn from some of that. And I don't have to survive anymore. Now I am thriving with my love beyond the sea.